Hey guys, another installment of a video blog post because this next one might be a little more lengthy than I prefer to do written. So it's a little easier to talk about. So what I'm going to discuss today is sort of a popular meme that gets thrown around in the tactical self-defense combatives training community. And that concept, that meme that gets thrown around is this idea that if you do competitions, that you'll get so used to following the rules that you won't be able to break out of it. Even if you're not on the range, if you're not on the mat and you're actually in the street, that we will be these robotic, mindless automatons that will follow the rules unthinkingly no matter what. I even heard one time, or I read one time on an online discussion forum where somebody was talking about how you would beat an MMA fighter or a grappler or a combat sport athlete. And this genius basically said, oh, just look at all the rules, all the things that are banned in the UFC and just do them. Now, outside of the fact that if you don't have any training, you're not going to be able to pull off anything, illegal or not. But even then, the whole idea that the person fighting you, who's a complete fighter, who's spent time training this, is going to be this mindless robot. It just makes no sense. So let's talk about it in detail and why I say that. Outside of the way the brain works, and the way that you talk to anybody who studies these kind of things, anybody who's done experiments, looked at any of the literature, and our brains don't work that way. Our brains don't follow that blind pattern all the time. But outside of that, even if they did, let's look at this idea that following the rules, training, practicing under the rules will cause you to follow them. So let's just forget about all the varied stuff. Let's just look at grappling for a second. Well, what rules, if I'm a grappler and I'm going to follow rules and I'm going to be stuck to them, what rules? Jiu-jitsu rules? Judo rules? Sambo rules? Greco-Roman wrestling rules? Folk-style wrestling rules? Freestyle wrestling rules? Those are all different. They all have different rules. They all have different ways to win. And if I do jiu-jitsu, I enter a jiu-jitsu competition one week, and then the next week I do a judo tournament, and then a month later I do a sambo tournament, and then a month or two after that I do a wrestling competition. Well, what rules am I ingraining into my system that I'm going to follow mindlessly? None. I'm changing all the time anyway. And that's not an unrealistic thing. Pretty much most people who do this will follow sort of that path. It's rare that you have a guy who just does judo and never pays attention to anything else. Especially in the United States, where traditionally for a very long time, we haven't had a whole lot of grappling-centric competition. So I remember when I first started jiu-jitsu, we did a lot of judo, and there was the local state, like AAU, and we had a thing called the Grand Canyon Games that would do wrestling. And so you have guys doing that. So we'd be jumping back and forth and then hitting the jiu-jitsu competitions. But let's even make it more ridiculous, or let's point out the ridiculousness even more. Let's stick to just jiu-jitsu, right? So I'm not going to do judo, I'm not going to do sambo, I'm not going to do any of those competitions. I'm going to do just jiu-jitsu. Again, what rules? International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation rules, Abu Dhabi rules, World Pro, 5 submission grappling, Naga, Grappler's Quest, on and on and on. Different organizations, all doing straight, legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, all with their own rule set. There's a lot of moves that you could do in a Naga tournament that you couldn't do in an IBJJF tournament. There are things you could do in IBJJF that you can't do in an Abu Dhabi tournament. again, how am I going to get so blinded to mindlessly following rules when I have to switch all the time? Oh, this week I'm going to do 5 submission grappling, and then 2 weeks I'm going to do IBGGF Pan Ams, and then right after that, Naga's in town, so I'm going to do that. I'm switching all the time. So how am I going to then, in the street, be a robot that can't change? Doesn't make any sense. But let's illustrate the stupidity of that even more. All right? Let's say, for sake of argument, that I do just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I only do IBJJF tournaments. No other sanctioning body. Just that. Well, then you say, well, there I'm going to get stuck following rules and I'll mindlessly follow. Again, what rules? Gi? No gi. Not only are there slightly different rules, the way I have to play the game, the way I have to win, the move sets that I can do change. And I have to be able to make that switch in the heat of the moment. What about, let's say I do all gi. I don't forget no gi for a minute. Let's say I'm doing all gi. Oh yeah, well then, shouldn't that be one monolithic rule set? No, not at all. For example, if I go and compete, what do I compete? Do I compete in the Masters division, the old man division, the above 30? Or do I compete in the adult, under 30? Rules for my belt are going to be the same, but the time limit's different. Adult, 10-minute, Masters, 5. And let me tell you something. The way you win, the way you have to function within that time limit is completely different between the two. The 10-minute match is not just a long 5-minute match. The strategy, how you have to go through it, your preparation is all different. So again, I could be switching. I could be training in the gym for 10-minute rounds and then go and compete 2 days later in a 5-minute round and completely switch how I have to operate. And here's another change. The rules for what's allowed, moves, that kind of thing, are different for each belt. There are stuff that I, as a black belt, can't do that a white belt can't do, or a blue belt can't do. There are things that a purple belt can do that a blue belt can't do. And so if I, as a black belt, I'm rolling with another black belt, fine, no problem. Same, all those same moves, no problem. But what if then in the next round, I'm now rolling with a white belt? It would be the height of being a horrible training partner if I were then to use the same moves that I just was using, that he as a white belt can't, might never have seen, might never have had a chance to train against. It would be pretty crappy for me to try to do a bicep slicer on a training partner who's never even seen it and never been trained to defend it. So what I have to do as a good training partner is I have to immediately, within the space of that 1 minute in between rounds, I have to make that switch. I have to switch from doing what I was just doing, all things legal that a black belt can do, now to a white belt. Now the next round, maybe I roll with the purple belt. Well, now I can do more stuff again to that purple belt than I could have done against the white, but not the same as I could with the black. So again, I'm making another switch within the space of round to round. So again, and this is regular. This is every single day you're on the mat, you're making these changes. So I would like one of these guys to explain to me how it is possible for me to mentally make those changes between grappling systems, between sanctioning bodies, between rounds with different partners. If I can make those mental adjustments like that, why can't I do it in the street? Why won't my brain, if I find myself in a fight in the street, why won't my brain say, wait a minute, we're in a completely new environment. This is not the mat. This is not the training environment. This is a different area. Why can't I make then physical actions that are different to match that. Makes no sense. I could do it on the mat. I do it in training all the time. So you see, this whole idea that rules will turn you into a robot, it's just ludicrous. The idea is a fantasy propagated by somebody who doesn't have the guts to actually train, or who's afraid of training and having their ego crushed when they fail. So, hopefully this made a little sense. Hopefully people kind of got a feel for, next time they hear that somewhere, they immediately kind of know where that guy is actually coming from, and it's not from a position of authority. So thanks for listening, guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.